I'm Shana Meyerson with the Yoga of War podcast, here today with two very special guests that I just met today, in fact. And when you hear their story, you're going to understand why I had to have them on the show this evening. With me today are Tami Raviv Doron Krakow, both with the Niv and Nirel Center for post-traumatic trauma, particularly from combat related in Israel. I'm sorry that this is not my most prepared for show ever. This is completely spontaneous this evening, completely based on the inspiration of this story. So I'm going to start where the story starts. We're all sitting here smiling, but I think that deep down inside, all three of us, as soon as we think about the start, there's a drop in the heart. As anybody who has followed the Israel story since October 7th, or obviously before October 7th, knows, everything changed on that day. Everything changed for the world. Everything changed for innocents. Everything changed for Jews, for Israel. But on a very tangible and real level, everything changed for the people who were directly affected by the horrors of October 7th. So I'm going to start, Tami, with you telling us, to whatever extent you feel comfortable, about your October 7th and what brought you here today, meaning what happened on October 7th that has led up to this moment.
So I'll say I had, before October 7th, I had a pretty good life. I actually thought it was quite perfect. I am married, I have 3 kids, each in their own route, doing quite well. I have my own business, doing business development between Israel and Japan. I assist Israeli high-tech companies to find collaboration in the Japanese market. I've been doing that for 25 years, and I loved it. Israel was the high-tech startup nation, and a lot of investments were coming into Israel, and we were really on a hype. I was actually supposed to be flying to Tokyo on October 7th evening, and my life turned upside down on that morning. I lost my daughter and her boyfriend, who lived on a Kibbutz called Kfar Aza, which was an amazing, beautiful, very quiet kibbutz in the Gaza envelope. And that was my 7th of October. Not going to go into details.
I could ask questions and you could answer to the extent that feels comfortable.
Okay.
So you live basically in the center of the country, which for people who don't know, as small as Israel is, you are still geographically distanced from the horrors that were unfolding. Let me start by, it all started unfolding at 6:30 a.m. When did you start receiving news of what was going on in the South? And what were your first thoughts, knowing that your daughter and her boyfriend were there in the South?
So I'll say that Niv and Nirel, Niv, my daughter, and Nirel, her boyfriend, were at our house on Friday night. There was a holiday in Israel, and they came for dinner for the holiday. And they usually would stay for the weekend with us, but she was studying for a very major exam. She was a student for psychology, taking an exam for first to second degree, which takes you to the clinical degree. And she had been studying for this exam for months. And the exam was supposed to take place on October 10th. So she wanted to go back home to study and to be in a quiet place before the exam. So they went back home late Friday night. She wrote back. They arrived home at about 1:04, something like that. And we went to sleep very late, so we didn't wake up until we got a call to say that Israel is being bombed and terrorists are have invaded Israel, I called Niv to ask if she was okay, and she said that they're in the shelter room, and she said she was okay. She had no idea what was really going on. At least she didn't say anything to me. I don't remember clearly what was said on that conversation because it wasn't something substantial. I didn't think it would be my last conversation with her. We closed the phone, and then we started to understand that it's really getting bad, and Nirel was sending messages on WhatsApp that there's a lot of shooting, a lot of shouting in Arabic, a lot of Arabs around their house, and his last message that came in said, "I'm putting my phone down, please pray for us," which wasn't something that he would usually say, so I knew it was really bad. And then when I tried to call again, the communication fell, and we got on TV and started to see slowly what was unfolding. News wasn't coming in so quickly at the beginning. They were just saying that no one really knew what was happening. It was such chaos. And I was trying to call the kibbutz to get to someone that would just reach their house to help them come out of the shelter, but they said that the fighting is literally over their home. And later on, we got on a call with Nirel's parents, whom we didn't know beforehand, and we were trying to figure out together what to do. So for 3 full days, we were just really trying to get someone to reach the shelter room and open the door. I thought they both had a good set of tools that would keep them inside the shelter room. Nirel was a carpenter, so he had really good hands. And they were both quite, I don't know how to say it, but maybe tough. I thought they would be okay, but we now know that the house was burnt and they couldn't stay. The smoke was just coming through the door and they couldn't stay inside. They had to jump out of the window. And they were both killed just a little after 10. But for 3 days we didn't know. And after 3 days, after so many people and after the soldiers that were there, and literally people said we can't reach their house because there's so much fighting going on around that house. But after 3 days, someone called me to say that they opened the shelter room and there wasn't anybody inside, and he said they didn't take any bodies out of that house. So for 3 more days we were hoping that they were taken hostage. But then on Friday we were notified that Niv was identified, and a few hours later Nirel was wasn't there. The family was notified, and that was it.
It's impossible, honestly, to imagine, especially in retrospect, those of us who watched the hostage crisis unfold for 2 years, to imagine a mother and a father to be pushed to the point that you're actually wishing your child was taken hostage. I can't imagine the anguish of those days as they unfolded. Can I ask, when they knocked on your door, how did you feel?
Good question.
You don't have to answer it.
Yeah, I usually don't talk about what I feel, but I'm trying to say that I didn't believe. It's like you hold your hand and you say, well, it didn't really happen. I still don't think it happened. I'm not going
That's okay. I'm gonna give you a moment, and Doron, what was your October 7th experience?
My wife and I had been in Israel since the middle of August. We came ahead of the arrival of our first grandchild, a baby boy who was born on the 23rd of August in Jerusalem. So we were there for the birth and for the Brit Milad. We stayed for a few weeks to help our son and daughter-in-law, both of whom were American immigrants. And we flew back to the United States on the afternoon of October 6th. On the morning of the 7th, and I was up quite early because of jet lag, it was 2 o'clock in the morning in the east. Already the fighting had begun. My kids live in a building in Jerusalem without a bomb shelter, so they were rushing to take their infant child to friends outside the city who had a big house with a safe room. But no sooner did they leave their home than Aaron got called up. He's a paratrooper. He had completed his 3 years of primary service, but he was immediately called into reserve duty. And by the end of the day, as chance would have it, his unit was deployed to Kfar Aza because there continued to be a presence of terrorists there well into the second day. So they were sent there. And my daughter-in-law, who was 6 weeks after giving birth, had an infant, and her husband, in heaven knows what circumstance, was by herself. So I got back on a plane on the morning of the 8th and came back to Israel. And I told my son that he should keep his eyes on what's happening in front of him, and that until he came home, I would make sure that Zoe and David were safe. And so for 4 months, I was living with Zoe and David in our little apartment in Tel Aviv, continuing my work as the CEO of the JCC Association of North America from 4 p.m. to 1 in the morning every day, and praying with all my heart that my son would return home safe. But I often tell people that I had 3 minutes, 3 seconds of peace every day. The first 3 seconds after I opened my eyes in the morning until I realized where I was and what the circumstances were. So my October 7th, that particular day I spent outside of Israel, but having only arrived a few hours before and having departed a few hours after that date in order to come back to Israel and be where it was necessary for me to be.
It's amazing how differently we all experienced that day. I of course was here in Los Angeles, and as traumatic as it is for people all the way across the world, it's impossible to imagine what it is to be in the middle of everything. Tami, I already have to apologize for asking that question, and I'm gonna go ahead and move away from the trauma of the moment, and let me switch gears, and can you tell me about Niv and what a beautiful daughter she is and will always be, her legacy, and
Okay, I'll try not to cry.
okay.
So, Niv, well, she was always a very busy person. Her day was always planned from the beginning to the end. She knew exactly what she was doing every minute of the day. She initiated camps. She volunteered in so many places. She was student, she was teaching, she was dancing, she was doing so many things. But at the end of the day, she was a psychologist by heart. She touched so many people. She met them in all kinds of junctions in their lives and gave them messages that they carry with them for life. She was very influential for many, many people. People come to me and say that they met her for one day and she made them change their decisions for life. So that was her.
They're still coming to you and telling you that?
Sometimes, yes. All kinds of friends who I didn't even know.
So this trauma sparked you to create something beautiful and healing, and it's the Niv and Nirel Center, inspired by your daughter and her boyfriend. What inside of you and at what point said, because it's very easy to sit within the trauma, or what within you said, I need to create something beautiful and meaningful and healing out of this trauma?
So I don't have a definite answer why. Some really powerful, some power pushed me to do this. People started to tell me that I need to think how to commemorate. And I could have done something very simple. I don't know, people said give scholarships to the university, maybe for camps, but I had to do something that had to do with treatment because that's who she was. And I knew that that's the most, if she was here, she would go and treat everyone. So it had to be something with treatment. Nirel was an amazing person, but he was suffering from PTSD from previous war, and he decided he would go to study law to assist people because it was very difficult for him to get his rights from the Israeli government. So he said, I have to help people get their rights and make it easy for them, not so to make an easy path and not so expensive like it was for him. So I said, okay, it would be treatment for PTSD and combat related is a good friend of mine's son who was in a previous war in Israel at the Gaza envelope. He was in Gaza and he encountered a very major event, and he had to handle it while he was in Gaza, and when he came out he got an Excellency Award, and he seemed like a normal guy that finishes the army in Israel, and for 5 years it seemed like he was normal, and after 5 years he went into reserves and he out of nowhere collapsed, and he was diagnosed with PTSD, and he has very strong family that assisted him. And I hadn't seen him for some years, and during our Shiva, he came and he just sat there looking really bad. He grew out his hair, he grew out his beard, he was under his cap with a service dog. And I looked at him and I thought to myself that if we wait 5-6 years ahead, this is the time that it takes that PTSD emerges. We will have a whole generation of men and women that are unfunctional, looking like him. And I thought that we have to have early intervention and assist these people after what they have seen. And I knew that it wasn't only him that was suffering, but also his family that didn't have any support. So when someone suffers, the parents, the spouses, the kids, everyone suffers around you. So I thought to myself, we need to create a place that would give support for PTSD, for the patient, for the people who are suffering and their families. And I asked him for help. I told him, tell me what's lacking. You've done so many things. There were some things in Israel already. And he said, at the beginning, he said, leave it, don't go into it. But then I said, let's direct it to your needs. Because we have to have something that gives support to what you need. And we sat down and we made lists of the things that were there already, and there were amazing NGOs and different types of services. But I noticed that there isn't one center, a place that you can just come. You went through war, you came back differently, you feel like you're not the same, you're not diagnosed with PTSD, but you feel like you need assistance, you'll have a place to come. And that we give all services under one roof, that you don't need to start looking for things. Because today there are many things that you can go surfing, you can go diving, you can go horseback riding, you can go to do yoga, but each thing is done separately. And I thought everything needed to be under one roof. And if you don't like one thing, you can try something else, and you have everything in one place. And with these ideas, I started my way. My family wasn't ready to join me, and they thought actually I was crazy, that I was going to initiate a center for PTSD. But once I made this decision, everything just happened by miracle. It just happened. And I met an amazing person who is a psychiatrist, who encountered, he was a manager of a ward in a mental health hospital. And in his reserve duty, he's a commander of a first response team of therapists that are with the forces on the border, and they give assistance after something happens. They assess the people and decide who goes back, who can't go back. And he was there on the 8th of October, seeing people encountered October 7th, and he understood it's going to be a tsunami. He says he thought he knew everything there is to know about trauma, and when he saw these people after October 7th, he understood we don't know anything about trauma. And that he went back to his hospital to say that the hospital will need to take a position in PTSD, combat PTSD, because it's going to be a tsunami. The manager of the hospital said, go ahead, gave him 1 day to start writing some program, and we met 2 days later, and by chance, and this collaboration, which was amazing between us, led for my advantage was that my ideas could get a very solid professional infrastructure. And for him, the advantage was that he could take his ideas out of the setting of a hospital. And we found this most amazing place overlooking the Mediterranean. Exactly what I had in mind. I thought I wanted something really cozy and huggy and not clinic type of place. And this is how we started our way.
And they gave you the building, if I understand, not even the building, 3 buildings.
Yeah,
Correct.
they didn't give it to us, but we need to pay for the rent.
Yeah.
But they gave it to, they believed it in us.
Yeah, all the pieces just fell into place. Doron, I want to ask you, you have a long career in serving the Jewish community, so thank you for that, because without the types of programs like the JCC, we would not have any Zionists left in America. I would say that, and I say this all the time, the reason I have this show is because I went to Zionist preschool, and I went to Zionist day school, and I went to Zionist summer camp, and I went to, believe it or not, back then, Cornell was almost all not almost all Jewish, it was Jewish enough to be Jewish. And then I went into Hollywood, and it was just like everything. I was always surrounded by proud Jewish people. So I want to thank you for that. You've had the opportunity to play leadership roles in so many organizations. How did you meet Tami? What was it about this project that made you decide it was something that you wanted to commit yourself to?
Look, I think this is another case of fate or destiny or some combination. My son spent the first 4 months of the war in combat, most of it inside Gaza. When he came home at the end of January, I returned to the U.S. to continue my work as the head of the JCC Association. But I was back for a few days when I began to realize that my place was no longer there, in spite of the fact that the work was vitally important, and I took a tremendous amount of pride in it. But I knew that my family, my kids in Israel, would need more support than I could provide from a distance, and I also knew that I needed to be working on the recovery. Having seen the first 4 months of the war up close, I knew the extent of the crisis in Israel, the mental health and physical health. The war was in a very uncertain place at that time. It was not at all obvious that we would end up as we have now, with Israel having largely triumphed over the bulk of the challenges that they faced at that time. But I knew that that was where I needed to be. And between wrapping up my work in New York and my wife and I returning to Israel, somebody who's a very important person in my life, a former shaliach to the JCC Association, who was approached by somebody who was connected to Tami and the effort to create the center, called me and said, Tami and Kfir, who would co-found the Niv and Nirel Center, were in New York, and I needed to meet with them. And so I met with them and heard their vision, that they had intended to find a place that people would not have to feel uncomfortable to come to, that didn't feel like a hospital or a clinic, but more like a retreat center. That they had discovered this location in one of the most beautiful settings in the country overlooking the Mediterranean, that the building was dilapidated and was going to need extensive renovation, but they were determined to make that the place that was going to be transformational for people in the greatest need. And I met Tami and talked to Kfir. We spent a couple of hours together, and I was captivated by their vision and by their extraordinary courage, because you don't go through what Tami and her family went through, or what Kfir experienced on the front lines of the war with patients in the worst throes of post-trauma, without an extraordinary amount of fortitude. And my feeling was that if there's some way I can be helpful, I'd be honored. But I was not at all sure in my mind that it would be possible to open a new center in short order in Israel, because that's not how things work in Israel. From a regulatory and legislative environment, everything seems to take a very long time. When my wife and I returned to Israel in June, we quickly found an opportunity to get together with Tami, and she said, come, I need to show you what we're preparing to open. And on the 1st of August of 2024, not 5 months, 4 months after I had met them in New York, and it was still an idea with a setting, but nothing more, they opened their doors. Kfir brought 15 therapists with him from the Levi Shlomo Mental Health Hospital. They spent 2 weeks in training and preparation, and on the 18th of August, their first patient arrived. And I think it's really important to understand the context and the scope of the issue. Prior to the 7th of October, in the entire country, there was only place for fewer than 8,000 people contending with post-trauma and post-traumatic stress syndrome. Physical infrastructure and professional infrastructure. And the large majority of those who were in treatment were veterans of the 2014 war. The war to which Tami referred, that the son of her dear friend had found himself in a terribly difficult and traumatic military setting that ultimately broke him, but not for several years. The bulk of the people in treatment had over time become increasingly disabled. And here we were, only a few months into this war, and it was already clear that the need was going to be in the tens of thousands. Today, the health estimates are that as many as 100,000 Israeli veterans are going to seek mental health support and assistance. And so it was imperative that new entities be begun and that new models of intervention be developed so that we could begin to contend with what the anticipated onslaught was going to look like. And so for me, to be of whatever support or assistance that I could as they began to bring their vision to life has turned into one of the great privileges of my career. And though here I'm fundamentally a lay leader and a member of the board, it is the thing closest to my heart. And so I've been very honored to work closely with Tami and Kfir, both in Israel and now on several occasions as we've traveled to the US to meet people that might be interested in being part of what we're doing.
Tami, can you tell us about your first patient? Obviously not their name, but in broad terms.
I want to say that it's our privilege to have you with us. So our first patient was a woman, and when she came in through our doors, we understood that there aren't any protocols written for combat-related trauma for women. Women have always served in armies under men, and protocols were always written by men for men. And the trauma is the same trauma, but women need different care. And October 7th opened, or revealed, or I don't know how to say it, but so many women were exposed to trauma. Not all fighters, some were just seeing videos of what was going on and encountered trauma. Some had to go tell families that they had lost their kids and encountered trauma. Some, that so many women were exposed to trauma, and they need a different type of care. And because there was nothing in the literature around the world, we started our own research for women, and we're actually just publishing our first paper. And we created new protocols to treat women.
Are other militaries around the world coming to you to learn from this research, or is it really sort of an underrepresented group that really the world needs to wake up to these issues?
No, I think, first of all, women serving in combat is a relatively new phenomenon, though it's increasingly substantial in Israel. And because this war overwhelmed the outlying bases on the border of Gaza and Israel, lots of women soldiers were in these bases. They were listening posts and intelligence outposts. They were first responders, and they were in service of the army, but quickly became drawn into the center of this issue. There is no base of knowledge in the world on gender-sensitive care for women experiencing combat-related trauma. And approaching it in the way we traditionally have with men as the primary object of our attention was simply inadequate to the need. So that Tami and Kfir were able to pivot and launch an academic research unit within their brand new enterprise has allowed us to begin to build the base upon which a lot of the future of care is going to depend. And while we don't have foreign militaries yet ready to recognize that what we're doing is something that they're going to need, there's great interest in some of the most significant research institutions in the world, including Columbia University, Harvard University, MIT, because of the fact we are charting a new course in areas of treatment for which there is little, if no, background at all. And that's allowed the Niv and Nirel Center to take its place in its own way in the startup nation, where it is obliged to innovate in the face of a colossal challenge for which there's no prior ability to contend, and chart a new course for how to contend with it. Women was the beginning, but there are also unique protocols for soldiers who came to see us who said, I need help, but I'm going back to my unit to continue to serve in reserves in 10 weeks, so my time is limited. And in therapeutics of this kind, somebody disabled by trauma is never known to be going back to
Right.
the scene of the trauma. But in Israel, the kinship within the units between the young men and women who are serving on the front lines is so strong that it became necessary to create interventions that would be geared for those who were going to be returning to combat scenarios and then coming back. It meant being sensitive to subpopulations from outside the Jewish community who serve in the IDF, whether they are Druze soldiers or Bedouin soldiers, where in both of those communities, the stigma attached to mental health issues of any kind preclude them from finding help in their own communities. And therefore, Niv and Nirel is evolving paradigms and treatment programs that are specifically geared for these subpopulations as well. I think one of the most extraordinary things that has been impressed on me, Tami and Kfir rushed to open this center long before a fully evolved plan and framework could have been in place because the need demanded it. They were overwhelmed by calls and overtures from people who said, we need help. And so, like having the frame of an airplane that had an engine and nothing else but the outside and the wings, they took off knowing they were going to have to continue to build the plane in flight. And over the course of the 16, 17 months now that they've been open, almost without fail every month they have pivoted to adjust the diagram, the game plan, the blueprint for this institution to reflect the latest things that they had learned and growing levels of understanding. And so in an incredibly short period of time, you have what Tami envisioned, a comprehensive framework, talk therapy, touch therapy, movement therapy, therapy with psychedelics, cutting edge high tech. They are working on couples therapy, on family therapy. Every person who comes to the center is urged to bring whoever their significant other, parents, even children, for whom the trauma is almost as severe as it is for the person who experienced it firsthand. It has been so profoundly impactful on families and communities. And so Niv and Nirel has a vision not just for helping a person adjust to being able to function, but providing them a context in which that function and that healing can be shared by the people closest to them. And it is notably profound to see the changes in people over the course of a handful of months that they come for the most intensive portion of the treatment. And beyond that, I can tell you, and I know or knew very little about the world of mental health and post-traumatic stress until I first got to know Tami and Kfir in such a close and significant way. But it's obvious to me, and I think it's broadly obvious in Israel, that this is not a problem that's going to be fixed anytime soon. The trauma and the disruption is going to take a generation or more for people who are going to be carrying this with them. And the center is geared to provide them with the tools to allow them to maintain their balance in their lives while learning to live with the things that they saw and they experienced. And they are modeling at Niv and Nirel approaches and modes of operation and strategies replicable in part or in whole in other parts of the country, and have drawn the attention of the key leaders from the Ministry of Defense, from the Ministry of Health, from the Office of the President of Israel, from former prime ministers who have come to recognize that what Tami was able to see, the light in the darkness that came into her world, was a vision for something that already does, for those who are being served, profoundly impact their lives, but will profoundly impact the field, which is perhaps as extraordinary as any other aspect of the work that she's led.
There's too many aspects that are extraordinary, but let's add that to the list. I'm curious, because you just listed a lot of offices and ministries. One that you didn't mention is the IDF. Is there any formal integration between what you're doing and the actual Israel Defense Forces?
So, first of all, we are connected to IDF. They refer people to us, but we cannot treat soldiers because soldiers, when they are in the army, they get their own support. So
And you're talking about those that are in the compulsory service, the active duty. So we start to treat soldiers who are reservists, civilians who are going in and out of military service.
Okay.
and that's most of Israel. So, but we are working very close with the army. They know of us, and we've got close connection to the mental health leaders there. So.
And the Army is a fundamental component of the Ministry of Defense. So in that context, our work with the military superstructure is a very present aspect of what we're doing.
Can you give me just one example of how you have found treating women with the combat trauma differs from treating a man?
Okay, I'll try. I'm not a professional.
Just
I'll say.
one concept.
But I know that, first of all, it's known that it takes women, as much as it seems like women ask for help easier than men in combat related, also sexual trauma, by the way. Women find that it takes them between 8 to 10 years to come to seek for help, and it finds them when in their relationships and in intimacy and motherhood, and so it touches them in different places and different times than men. And we found that we have now 30% of our patients are women, and we find that they have it harder to hold relationships, while men are holding relationships. They're not always good. We're doing a lot of family couple intervention, but they are coupling, whereas women, most of the women that are coming to the center are not. Also, women have been fighting to get into combat roles, and they're afraid that if they would be perceived as weak, they want to be fighters sometimes. So if they are perceived as weak, they'll ruin it for the other women. So they don't want to come out with it.
There was a data point in respect to this that Fear mentioned in a number of the presentations that we've done recently, where he says nearly 3/4 of the men who come to the center in need of care are in a relationship with a significant other, and fewer than 30% of women are in a relationship with a significant other when they come for care. That the trauma impact on them disables their ability to maintain a significant romantic relationship, and that's fundamentally different from men. So it's a single example of how, if you're not approaching it in a manner that is uniquely sensitized to the needs of women, you're missing the forest for the trees relative to your ability to help them. So the fact, I think, that women are such a substantial proportion of the people who are turning to the Niv and Nirel Center for help is a breakthrough in self-awareness and in the opportunity, again, that Tami and Fear created. Most people who come out of war having experienced a traumatic event would not describe themselves as in post-traumatic stress syndrome or somehow broken. They just know that they're not the way they were before. But the last thing they want to do is walk through the doors of a hospital or come to a place that's for sick or broken people. It wouldn't feel comfortable for them to do it. And many of them refuse even to alert the government to the fact that they're in treatment, even though that's the only way the treatment gets paid for. But Tami envisioned a place that would feel more like a retreat center, that it sits on a bluff overlooking the Mediterranean with the sounds of the waves in the background, that the place is with pastel colors and soft furnishings, that you walk in the door and it's almost like you're greeted with a hug and an embrace saying, come on in, have a coffee, and let's sit down and talk about what's happening with you and maybe how we can be helpful. It's a fundamentally different paradigm. And as a result of that, people are coming. And the more that hear, the more that come. We originally anticipated that there would be a geographic zone that would draw people to the center. But because it's the only center of its kind in Israel and its reputation has quickly grown so great, we have people coming from all corners of the country, from as far north as the northern Galil and the Golan Heights, and as far south as the Negev. They'll come even though we're non-residential, even though it's entirely outpatient, even though some of them need to figure out a place to stay for a night or two so that they can benefit from the treatment program for multiple days each time they visit, because the Niv and Nirel Center has created a window to the possibility of getting right that in many respects is unrivaled anywhere in the country.
I want to talk more about the specific offerings, but I do have a question that comes up when you talk about this and about the people who surprisingly are reaching out in numbers that you didn't expect. How do you feel, seeing as, for all intents and purposes, it's an entire nation that has been traumatized. So I think there's a lot more relatability to, again, it's a vast spectrum of experience, but there's nobody in Israel who is untouched today from October 7th. Do you feel as if the stigma that has traditionally surrounded post-traumatic stress has shifted, changed, or become less of a stigma in Israel since this war began, since October 7th?
This is a question. I think it's widely spoken, people talk it more easily, but it's not so easy to ask for help. So it depends. In our center we say, you went to war, you came back differently, you have a place to get tools, you have to go back to your cycles of life. You don't need to recognize this PTSD. And I think that makes it easier to come, because it's really difficult to go back to your cycles of life. You went through so many days of war and away from your family, away from your kids, away from your job, and now just one day you just go back to everything as if nothing happened. The changes are really difficult. So it's less stigmatized, I think. I want to say, but I'm not sure it's 100% right, because I know that people have it very difficult to come to ask for help.
Yeah, I actually think I would draw the distinction a little bit differently. My son has now done more than 300 days in combat since the 7th of October. It's not particularly unusual for an infantry soldier like him. But for the first time in my knowledge of the country, when they complete a deployment of reserve duty, they're required to attend 2 days of decompression, essentially, as a unit in a hotel setting, where they, with the help of counselors, chronicle and timeline the experiences that they've had, and at which they are introduced to all of the options that are available to them should they or a spouse or significant other require assistance. I don't think that necessarily means that so many more people will immediately seek the assistance, but it does mean that the Army is aware that it's a problem, and they are taking the initiative to make sure that the soldiers know that these things are available to them should they need it. At the same time, Israel is a country on war footing. The soldiers are macho Israelis, men and women. They go off to war. They're prepared to be fighters. They understand the nature of the enemy. And in some ways, getting to a place where it's not an admission of weakness in order to seek help is a major leap. So I think that's improving incrementally, and I think the fact that the country is inviting people to be able to do that is softening the barriers, but by no means eliminating them. And again, we know that for the most part, post-traumatic stress will not disable for a number of years in most cases. So you may feel different, but you're functioning, and so you're not necessarily in a rush to seek help. But again, the fact that the numbers have gone up as high as they have, that we're now talking between 20, 25,000 soldiers that have already sought mental health service of one kind or another, is indication that the attitude, the self-perception is changing. but the closer we can bring service to a scenario that doesn't unsettle them or make them uncomfortable, the more likely we are to intervene earlier and then forestall the likelihood of greater disability. And that's really the mission here, is to give people back enough balance in their lives so that they can function and are already accustomed to the idea that there's somebody to call and there's someplace to go as and when it becomes necessary to seek a helping hand.
Yeah, and it's interesting that today you said, can we use the words combat-related trauma instead? And this is actually an important point, because there's a fallacy in using the nomenclature of post-traumatic stress disorder right now for a number of reasons. One is it's not post. Israel is still in the process, still at war, still processing everything that's gone on. And then we have the D at the end, the disorder, because I think that in today's understanding, we need to accept that this is more normal than a disorder. The disorder would be if you weren't traumatized by the events that have gone on in a way. So to focus on combat-related stress is a much more specific term. And I'm curious, Doron, since your son has served over 300 days, is this a discussion you've had with him?
We have touched on the topic. I know that when he came out of Gaza the first time, he was incredibly short-tempered. He was shaken by loud noises. He was not himself. He's much more himself now. And I'm very mindful of what's going on around him and his family and the life that he's supposed to be leading. He's a student in medical school, and I'm not really sure how he or young people like him manage to maintain directionality in their lives when they're in and out of places that require them to take an entirely different approach, mental and psychological approach. Again, the data tells us that 1 in 5 of these reservists will need some sort of mental or psychological assistance over the course of time. So the good news is, I guess, that 80% of them won't. And we don't know who they are until life takes the course that it takes. The fact that so many will, and that there are an increasing number of answers out there for them, matters a great deal. And I'd like to visit one other thing that you alluded to before. I think that the Western world has seen some horrific traumatic events, September 11th or subway bombings, or there have been things all over the Western world. And when the people who have been experiencing them have required help, legions of mental health experts came from other places, people who had not directly experienced the trauma themselves, and made themselves available as objective outside experts to help these people navigate the minefield of their post-trauma. In Israel, nobody was not directly affected by the trauma. The therapists at the center, some of whom lost children at the Nova Festival, some of whom, like my family, have kids who've served extensively in combat, some of whom are connected with families who were directly impacted, who suffered. Nobody didn't attend countless funerals and went to countless Shiva visits. So they are already in a highly sensitized place about the trauma, and they're spending all of their time day after day with people who are experiencing the worst of the post-traumatic reality. And so we have to be notably attentive to supporting the therapeutic staff, to supporting the professionals who work there, to be conscious of the fact that if we don't take care of them as an additional target population, we won't be able to enable them to take care of the people that are ostensibly the primary target population. So the challenge, of course, is there's nobody immune to the effects of primary, secondary, or tertiary trauma. And the blessing of the place is that because nobody is disconnected from it, their determination to participate in helping people restore their equilibrium is, in my view, all the more profound. It's deeply personal for everybody who passes through the door. It's a small country, and this is a citizen military. and citizen first responders, and the entire citizenry has been traumatized in certain respects, and it falls to the entire citizenry to figure out how to navigate our way through it. And again, an inspirational place like the Niv and Nirel Center is not only doing that now for 250 patients on our way when we finish the renovations of our building to as many as 1,000 or more annually. It is showcasing methodologies that have not previously been in use and that will be replicable in whole or in part in additional centers that are no doubt going to be created in the wake of the Niv and Nirel Center in the months and years to come.
I'm curious, do you have specific protocols for caring for the therapists?
We're working on it, on the well-being of the therapists all the time. It's something that concerns us. I don't know if it's actual protocols, but I assume we're working by protocols, but it's just a major concern. It's something that we're dealing with day by day.
Every therapist is getting a routine opportunity to work with a supervising therapist to process their experience, by the way, up to and including Kfir Pfeffer, the clinical director of the center, who has somebody on the hospital staff where he works who is checking on him. There are routine seminars. There have been periodic retreats. Outside therapists have come in to work with the therapist as a group, as a target audience. So the protocols, like very much of the other elements that we're doing at the center, are evolving with the experience that we're having in working with them. But there is acute and fundamental awareness that this is an intentional component of the work that we're doing. We've grown from 15 therapists in August of 2024 to 35 in January of 2026. Another 5 or 6 are expected before the end of the first quarter of this calendar year. And when we are operating at full capacity, we will probably have to double again. So you're talking ultimately about 80 therapists with various specialties who will be working at any given time. And we want to maintain the best of them throughout the duration of their tenures with the center, knowing that for some it will be inevitable that they'll work for some period of time and that will reach the limit of what they're capable of doing, and others will need to come. But I think the acute awareness makes the therapeutic team target population 1A if we're going to be successful.
Yeah, I'm thinking about the tragedies that have come from the Zaka workers and the Magen David Adom first responders, which leads me to the next question. Then I want to talk about the more uplifting aspects of what you're doing. But we've seen numerous suicides from first responders, not to mention, of course, the soldiers, and the most recent of which was Josh Boone last week, I believe, the lone soldier. I think that this has to be the most difficult part of what you do, because suicide is something that often comes without warning, and I'm wondering, like, how are you tackling this specific challenge? Is there a way to communicate without triggering that people can and should reach out? Is there a way, do you know of, to break that barrier?
Well, it's a difficult question. It's an issue that we're addressing all the time. Our advantage is that we're getting all the clinical support from a mental health institute that has the ability to hospitalize suicidal people. So if we sense even slightly that someone is suicidal, we have the option to hospitalize, and the same staff sees them at the hospital, so it gives them really the comfort that they know the people, and then they can come back to our center to be treated. But it's not an easy subject. It's being studied, it's being evaluated, it's being discussed in Israel these days. We try to do our best.
But far too many of the people who end up becoming suicidal or who tragically succeed in taking their own lives have not necessarily been in treatment, have not given signals, they have struggled in silence, they've struggled alone. Josh Boone served extensively, and up until 2 weeks before his suicide, he was an active duty reservist. So there didn't appear to be any indication, but one of the great challenges of lone soldiers, like my son was initially, they come from abroad, they don't have immediate family, their support system therefore is different, and the people that know them best are not in a position to offer insight into the signals that they may be giving off, because the people that know them best are often thousands of miles away. So there is a part of this that cannot be prevented. The issue is helping to ensure that the large majority of people for whom an engagement has begun are supported in such a way that it shouldn't come to such an outcome. And again, as Tami was talking about, because the Niv and Nirel Center has a formal linked relationship with the Lev Shalom Mental Health Hospital, trained therapists are in a position to say, we have somebody here that requires more than we are capable of doing on an outpatient basis, and there is a kindred rapport, a partnership that exists there. So for those who do find their way into our care, we're much more likely to forestall the worst outcomes as we work towards better ones than we are for people who haven't found their way into the mental health system, or who found their way in but not to an aspect of the system that is acutely attuned to the kinds of signals and concerns that we find among the patients in our care.
So if someone comes to the center, they drive there from Haifa, or they've driven hours to get there, what would they experience? I get the sense there isn't a typical experience that is highly tailored. So they walk in the door, and then what happens once they've been accepted into the program?
So they have 3 or 4 types. Everything is really tailored. So I'm just saying, hypothetically, they can come and get a one-on-one treatment with a therapist, and then go into yoga that is sensitive to trauma. They can just sit outside and look at the beach. Sometimes they do that, they have coffee. We had one of the girls that comes, she's a student during her 6th year for medical school, and after October 7th, she said she couldn't concentrate anymore. She couldn't stay down and study, and she was entering the exams, and she just came to study. She just came to sit down. She said, I feel that I'm secure here, and she just sat there with her headphones and studied. So they each have their own. Sometimes they stay for a group, some sessions. They go. We have a running group. We're now opening a surfing group, so they can join different types of.
Do they stay for a day? Do they stay for an hour? Do they come weekly? Do they come daily? Like, what kind of schedule?
So it really varies between each one. So we just recently opened an intensive day program for people who are suffering from more severe symptoms, and they come for 3 full days for very intensive treatment. This is for 10 weeks, and so they get breakfast, they get lunch, they have really many types of, they have an open studio for art, and so this is a very closed program. We have technology that we've implemented, so they go through sessions of neurofeedback, or they go through sessions of TMS, which is waves that go to brain that help to reduce depression and anxiety. We have so many variety of things, and if they come for the clinic, They come mostly once, maximum twice a week.
For a couple of hours at a time. I think the intake, as I understand it, is that typically with a senior physician or therapist, it's a 2 or 3 hour intake interview, and initial recommendations are made about what the nature of the therapeutic program would be, often some combination of talk therapy and the other options in touch or movement or group, with family, without, with significant other, without. And there's enough variety in the interventions that are going on there that people can move from an initial approach to a different one based on how they're responding, based on what the therapists recommend for them, and also based on their familiarity with what's being offered there and the chance to choose other things. Now, I think when the center opened, this clinic approach once or twice a week for a couple of hours at a time for 6 months was thought to be the standard approach, but then we found out that some people are going back to military service and we don't have as much time. Then we found out that there were others who, because they had more severe symptoms, required this intensive day program, which waited for us to open the second wing of the building because that was where we could house and manage that program in a proper way. So those folks are there full days, every other day, 3 days a week, but the Kfir and the clinical staff say that it's vitally important that they not be in therapy all the time, that they bring the tools that they're learning in intensive therapy home, and so they only come every other day. And the idea that people would come once or twice a week for 6 months and then be reevaluated with the presumption that there would be some continuing care. That'll be the third plank of our work. So we have the clinic and we have the intensive day, and then when you finish the clinical portion, we want to maintain the connection through group, through outreach. It can be done remotely. There's an existing relationship. People have some flare-ups of their need and they can come back to the center. The presumption is there will be a durable, long-standing relationship for as long as it's necessary. And that also allows a level of comfort because you want to have the confidence to return to your life, but know that there's a way to seek additional support or assistance should the want or need arise. And so that again is part of the evolutionary work that we're doing. I also think that the other profoundly important part of it is that our first worry is not how patients are going to pay for the service. They don't have to have notified their insurance or the state that they have either a disability or a need, because for them very often the act of doing that diminishes their state and not strengthens it. And that we have the opportunity to say that if we can help you, come, no questions asked. And we have the good fortune to know that in the wider Jewish world are people who would very gladly join our extended community by making it possible for people who can't pay to get the services that they need. And at the moment, slightly more than half of the people that are in treatment at the Niv and Nirel Center are funded by outside donors, funders, and philanthropists for whom this is the way they contribute to the recovery effort. This was the way that my wife and I started our participation there. And there's something incredibly gratifying to know that while we can't be part of the healing because we don't have those skills, we can enable the healing because we have the financial capacity or the will to be able to help in that regard. And I think even though I'm confident that the state and the government in time will evolve relative to its ability to support a wider audience of people in need without the stigma and without some of the requirements, government progresses very slowly. In the meantime, we can't wait because the people need our help now. And so we'll do as much as we need to do for as long as we need to do it until the apparatus of the healthcare system and the healthcare intervention system fills more and more of that space, allowing us, I expect, to continue to evolve, to specialize, and to innovate in ways that will meet the emerging needs of this population and future populations as well.
And before we sign off tonight, I am going to ask you guys to tell us where people can find you. But in the meantime, I just want everybody to know that in the show notes there are 2 donation links so that you can donate to the center and do your part in helping the soldiers to get the care that they need. I want to ask you sort of a more holistic question of what has this experience taught you about the strength and the fragility of the IDF soldiers?
Well, I want to say that one thing that really comforts me is that this is our next generation that's going to lead these kids that were the TikTok generation that we thought nothing will come out of them, have really proved us wrong and proved themselves so deserved. I don't know how to say it. We couldn't stop saying that we needed to say thank you and to say we're sorry that we misthought of what they could do. So this is one very major thing to say about our children. I have a lot of hope. I think this place we've creates a lot of hope, and I definitely think that Israeli next generation is going to be very it's a special generation.
I couldn't agree more. I feel like I've been a close observer until recently from the outside, but deeply engaged in Israel and spending a lot of time there. And I think this is the greatest generation that this country has yet produced. So while it needs to find its resilience beyond the effects of this current war, it has already demonstrated the level of determination and commitment and vitality and courage and heroism that's well beyond anything that anybody had a right to expect. And so we should feel nothing but optimistic about it. But I would add something else, Shana, and I want to tell you how, first of all, how grateful we are having had the opportunity to meet you today and to already find ourselves sitting here in conversation with you and with your listeners and your audience. We're deeply grateful because we want people to know what we're doing, not so much for us, but because we want them to understand the nature of what Israeli society is contending with. But I have to say, what Tami experienced and is unimaginable. What Kfir had to contend with on the front lines with Israeli soldiers after the start of the war and the survivors of the bases that were overrun, to me, is unimaginable. That they have found a way to bring light into the darkness and to make it possible to bring light into the lives of hundreds of soldiers and thousands of family members, and to those that have become close observers, is a miracle. And a reflection of the fact that there is no limit to the capacity of the human spirit, even in the most difficult of times. And I know it embarrasses her, but I feel the need to repeat something that I find myself saying very often these days, that Tami and Kfir are angels.
Yes.
And that we have the opportunity to be in the presence of angels and to enable them to achieve the things that they have dreamt and imagined and are now creating is one of the great honors of our lives.
Amen. And Tami, I do have to say that for all the inspiration that you get from this greatest generation, you are the physical embodiment of superhuman resilience that most people would never be able to achieve, but not to mitigate it. I see it in so many of the Israelis who have also experienced these vast tragedies. What do you think is the secret to Israeli resilience and or your own superhuman angelic resilience?
If you would have asked me before October 7th, I would have said that I would never be. It's the biggest scare to lose your child. You know, you wake up at night just to put the covers over them. So it's something you can't even ever imagine that you'd have to encounter. So I can't say I'm not nothing, no superwoman, and no. It just landed on me one day, and this superpower is pushing me to do this. I can't explain it. It's not something that has explanation.
Have the events of the last few years affected your faith in any way?
It created new faith in me. Faith has its ways. It's difficult to explain. I believe in all kinds of things that I didn't believe beforehand. Yeah, I think maybe in ways I believe in the next world. I believe Niv is here. I believe she's doing a lot of work behind the scenes, pushing and creating things. So this is a new belief that I took on myself. I don't know how to say. I can say that Nirel comes from a very religious family, so we have a very religious side with belief in God. My husband is very upset. He doesn't, he thinks if there was a God, he would have been there to help on that day. So belief it varies, all kinds of types of beliefs. I took on myself new belief. I believe in new things that I didn't think about them or I didn't believe in them beforehand. And I believe in them now. It gives me strength.
How about you, Dawn? Has your faith changed at all in the last 2.5 years?
We will never be able to come to grips with why horrible things happen in the worst imaginable ways, and that people suffer in the ways that they do. It's incongruous with the sense of a greater power shaping our path and our destiny. And yet, in my mind, there can be no arguing that the currents that brought this constellation of people together to do the good that they're doing now is not an accident. And so I share Tami's faith in something bigger, and in the fact that the people we've lost remain in our hearts, in our thoughts, and they're waiting to be reconnected with us over the course of whatever the path forward is going to bring. It can't be an accident that we all found ourselves having the opportunity to do good together in this way.
Yeah, I do have to say, as the randomest side note ever made in a podcast, that every single time you say Kfir, you guys know today is Kfir Bibas's birthday. So every single time you say that, my heart just breaks all over again. And I do, before I forget, do want to mention, we still have one hostage, Raviv, who I'm so afraid is going to become the next Hadar Golden with all the chaos of the world, that we just can't let that slip through the cracks, and we have to get that last missing piece home. So I just, again, a random side note, but I had to say it because every time you say Kfir, my heart breaks. So that being said, can you guys tell us how can people find you, support you, visit you, all the things?
So we are on Instagram, Niv and Nirel Center. We're on Facebook. We have our website is not good enough yet, but we have a landing page. We'll work on it, and it will be good soon. So Niv and Nirel Center.
And thanks to you, the show notes contain all of the links, and people who come to Israel should look for us, and we would love to see people there. The more people that know what we're doing, the more energy there is, not just to support what we do specifically, but growing the universe of things that are being done that are of a type with the work that we're doing, And we'll be doing it for as long as it's necessary to help every last person that will need us to get the balance back in their lives that they are so richly deserving of.
So, amazing, amazing. I'm gonna be like all verklempt all night. Last question, because I always ask this every show for both of you. What do the words Am Yisrael Chai mean to you?
Wow, they're very powerful words for me. I think it's beyond everything that on top, למרות הכל, how do you say?
In spite of
In
everything.
spite and despite, and we're here and we're going to stay here. We're not going anywhere. And Am Yisrael Chai.
For me, the words are timeless and boundaryless. Am Yisrael Chai refers to the vitality of the Jewish people, the chain of whose history stretches back 4,000 years, a link in the chain for which we bear responsibility today, and we do so with tremendous conviction and determination. And we know that the ensuing links in the chain will be entirely dependent on the strength of this one. Am Yisrael Chai means that looking backwards or looking forward, we share accountability, responsibility, history, destiny, and fate.
Wow. Well, I know we're both like, wow, okay. That was deeply profound. Thank you both for being two very, very important links in this chain that we can reach from across the world and share this space and hopefully work together for a better future and healing for the nation of Israel.
Amen.
Am Yisrael.
Am Yisrael